Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Green Tea Podcast. This is your host, Gracie Gray.
Artlist IO.
And Emma, hello.
Today, we have a special episode talking all about how to become your own leader and how to find your own leadership using astrology as well. We actually haven't been keeping in touch for about 2 weeks now because I was away and Emma was busy as well. And we've learned a lot within these 2 weeks. So, Emma, what is in the astrology of today's episode regarding today's topic?
Yes, so today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership style by sign or by element, I should say, just to give a more general overview, as well as covering certain placements that might allude to or give you some insight on what leadership style you might carry, even despite element.
Wow. All right. So I guess depending on, I think you said like fire, air, earth, and water, there's different type of leaderships, right? Could you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yes, so it's more so that the element that your sign is in can tell you a little bit about the strategy through which you embody leadership. Now, of course, we are bigger than astrology, so this may not necessarily apply as rigidly as it sounds. But yes, the different elements could indicate a different style of leadership. So, for example, if you are somebody who's dominant in fire energy, or you have certain placements like the sun or Mars in fire signs, you might be the type of leader who is very intuitive. You're courageous. You have a willingness to take action. You are the encourager of the leaders, if you will. They're very inspiring and motivating. But for example, there can also be a shadow with this type of leader, right? Fire is very forceful. So it could be somebody who does come off a little bit aggressive, perhaps, in the way that they speak to people or the way that they lead. They might become a little bit, I don't want to say like dictatorial, but they can have a little bit of that energy as well, where they like to be in control and they like people to toe their line. They can come off a little bit pushy as well. But apart from that, I mean, wildly creative, intuitive, action taking people, very inspiring. That is contrast to somebody who is perhaps high in water sign energy. Their leadership style may be more focused on instinct, listening to emotions, becoming emotionally intelligent, using empathy and compassion as a lens through which they navigate leadership. They may also become very protective of themselves, say it's a business, their team, whatever it is, right? There's a high level of emotional intelligence that goes into it. But again, the shadow here could be something like passive aggressive behavior or emotional manipulation if you're not getting what you want from somebody, or even the tendency to be run by your emotions or to make all of your decisions heavily influenced by your feelings and then realize later, oh, I should have maybe thought about that, or maybe, whatever. And then you also have earth signs and air signs. Earth sign leadership is generally can be people that hold others to high standards, which of course has its positives and negatives, I'm sure. But they're very grounded people, very reliable people. They're generally calm and down to earth when they're in their highest embodiment, so very reliable, solid people that you want to go to when you're really having a crisis and you're like, oh, what do I do? They're like, hey, I got it. We're cool. We can do this. Shadow side of this could be somebody who, because of that, though, could be a little bit rigid. They could be a bit inflexible. They want it similar to the way fire signs could be, their way or the highway, but it's not necessarily through a force. It's just through their perception of like what is accurate and best for everybody, which may or may not be true. And then last but not least, of course, is air signs. These are the signs that rule mental intellect. So these people are highly cognitively intelligent. Generally, they're great planners. They're great at seeing multiple angles of a situation or a problem or an employee, whatever the case is. Great with innovation, creating new ideas. Also, speaking and communicating may be a strength of theirs, which is, of course, very helpful with leadership. But for example, shadows could be things like being very harsh with their words, saying things that are very hard to hear, or saying it in a very, it could be manipulative, it could be just a harsh way. The other thing, too, is that there could be a tendency to manipulate the truth, to use words as a way to manipulate or even lie. I'll give an example of this. I know that Donald Trump is a Gemini. And I saw this really interesting clip that somebody did about how Donald Trump is one of those people who I don't want to say manipulates the truth, but sort of manipulates the truth and has been caught lying in the past to gain his influence and to gain his power, which is interesting because Gemini is an air sign, and that is one of the shadows that can come with being, an air sign leader. So, in a nutshell, thank you for giving me the space to share that. In a nutshell, this is sort of how leadership could be broken up by sign on a general level.
Yeah, because I know you said like the underground world of nightlife, like strip clubs, you see a lot of Scorpios. I'm wondering, maybe in the political world, what sign dominates? That's also
Mm,
interesting.
yeah. I haven't looked that up, but maybe I will. Sounds interesting.
Yeah. So I guess
Yeah.
I want to talk about what kind of leaders are we and what kind of stories that we can share today. I have an interesting story today about working 9 to 5 versus the influencer freelancer life. What kind of leaders is Emma and I? To be honest, I've never thought of myself as a leader. So when Emma, you told me that I was destined to become a leader of my own, it really shocked me, but it has taught me so much this year that I need to step up and not be so passive and say what I want to say and put my foot on the ground. Because I think for me personally, my personality being very passive, I've came to a point where my patience is just really quickly running out, and I can't be the old Grace anymore. So Emma, what kind of leader, or do you feel like you're a leader?
Yeah, so I love that you just said all that, by the way, because I totally see like leadership quality in you, even if it's not traditionally what we would consider leadership. I think for me, I think I do consider myself a leader, but I don't consider myself a leader as in, oh, in the world, I'm seen as this expert, this leader person by society's standards. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, being the president or somebody in this very elevated position of power. I actually think that perhaps that begs a different question of what does it actually mean to be a leader and what is leadership in the first place? And similar to you, I would say that uh, for me, yes, I do feel like a leader, but it's not because it was given to me by a position of power. It's just because to me, leadership is a quality innately that all of us have. And to be a leader is like a leader, it's like an archetype, right? It's a way of being, it's a way of living and holding yourself and carrying yourself. You can embody leadership no matter what. No matter if you're in a position of power or not, you can embody leadership at work or at home or in your community. It doesn't really matter, right? So I do consider myself a leader and I try to act in that way.
Yeah, I love that because, leadership comes in many different shades. You could be a political leader, you could be an entrepreneur, you could have a lot of staff working under you, or you could be a leader of your own life, such as, being an influencer and you being a freelancer as well. We have to make our own ways to make money. We have to make
Yeah.
our own schedules, and that is a lot harder than it looks. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people say, well, this is a dream job, but, because you're your own leader, there's so much more responsibility that we have to take. And so recently agreed to go on this like K-pop tour, and I was working as a staff. Now, I didn't know that I was going to do a lot of like extra literally manual work because it was a little bit of a short staff. It has been probably like 10 years, Emma, since I've worked
Wow.
like technically a 9 to 5 job, not for
Mhm.
myself, since I was always a singer, being an influencer, I get to make my own rules, what time I wake up, what time I go to sleep, what videos I'm going to push out. And that also determines my income as well. The only 9 to 5 jobs I had in my life was like back 10 years ago in Korea, or when I was like in high school. I worked for like Hollister for 3 months. I worked at like a boba shop, but they were very short, like just couple months. So it's been 10 years since I had to work under someone. And that was such a weird and like interesting experience because
Mm.
this time around, like I had to do something that somebody told you to do. You had to wake up at a certain time. You had to go home at a certain time. I kind of went into this very rebel mindset of like, I'm an influencer. I'm going to do what I want to do. And later, coming out of the 2 weeks, I've kind of regretted the way that I went about it with this
Mhm.
K-pop tour because, I realized that when you have this like 9 to 5 job, it's about teamwork. It's not really about you. And nobody sees you as a special star influencer there. Like you're just one of the staff. So I guess my point is I don't know if that's the kind of job I do want to continue, but there is something that I learned so much about it. I do like being an influencer. I do like being my own star. I do have that characteristics where it's hard for me to fit into that 9 to 5 frame. But I do think that some people are great followers. I think some people are great leaders in that system. So yeah, that's what I've learned in the last 2 weeks.
That's amazing. And I really love I guess you could call it like personal responsibility that you take there of
Yeah.
acknowledging, hey, I'm grateful for my life and my lifestyle and my way of living. I miscalculated that when I brought that into this and I took this attitude that maybe made me realize like, oh, I could have been more collaborative or I could have, you know, um, thought a little bit more about how everybody else is working. First of all, I just wanted to say that. That's awesome.
I guess I want to
I guess
ask you, have you ever had that 9 to 5 kind of life? And which one do you think fits best? Or
mm,
I'm thinking, are we the generation where we're just too privileged, where
mm,
there's so much work at home, influence our life, that are we just too privileged to not be able to work the 9 to 5 anymore?
oh my God. Wow. What a great question. Um, I have worked a 9 to 5 before, and I have obviously done what I do now, more freelancing entrepreneurship. And I think we've talked about this before, I'm sure, but I gravitate toward the freelancing lifestyle because I enjoy having a little bit more creative control over the things that I do. I enjoy the freedom and the flexibility of being able to work when I want. But of course, like I said, that's not um, without responsibility, right? You know that too. You don't have somebody who is counting on you to show up from this hour to this hour that holds you accountable in this structural way. You have to be the one that shows up, does the work, keeps things moving. You can't really just rely on, oh, I'm just showing up and I'm going to get paid no matter what. I think for me, it's been interesting because I find that what I desire is to have freedom and flexibility, the ability to like be an entrepreneur and have this, like everything I just said. But there is a part of me that does need structure and that does need some type of, there's part of me that needs structure. And I feel like the 9 to 5 lifestyle really helped give me that. And it gave me a space where I could go and say, even if I wasn't in a managerial role, I could still do my best to be a leader within the role that I had. So it did help me to hone the skills of understanding how do I lead in whatever space I'm in instead of waiting to get to a certain position for me to then all of a sudden decide, oh, I should actually be a leader or I should try to embody this characteristic or whatever. So I do think that there are pros and cons, but I think overall, doing what I do now with freelancing and business is much more my speed. And I did want to quickly add to your point about like, are we this generation that is just not, whatever. I think there is a big, long conversation that we can have about that. But I do think that this generation of people, especially Gen Z, definitely, but even like millennials to a certain degree, are people who are here to redefine what it means to work. Like what does our workforce look like? And not to bring astrology into this, but a lot of us have Neptune and Capricorn. I don't know exactly the dates, but like I have it, you have it. People that born in the 80s, I think, have it also, or like earlier in the 80s don't, but somewhere in the 80s and 90s. When you think about Neptune and Capricorn, it can signify a generation of people that is here to kind of reframe the way that the workforce is, to show us that we can have a little bit more Neptunian energy, that we don't have to be so rigid and so 9 to 5 and so within the box. We can take our emotions and our desires and our dreams and our inspiration and make that into work or infuse that into our careers, or we can do something that's more free. I don't want to say free spirited like literally, but something more free spirited even in the way that we go about things. So I do think that times have changed in a way, but I do think there are people out there who do still enjoy what would be considered more traditional in terms of a way of life with leadership.
I think the biggest problem for me working under that 9 to 5 is just that I felt so strongly that there was no time for me.
Mm,
I'm constantly working for somebody else, for a different company, and I didn't have time to. I know this may sound so funny, but like just having time to do a little makeup or like taking care of yourself. Like you're just so exhausted by the end of the day, you just go to sleep, and next morning you're out there grinding, just working. It's just not for me. I mean, is it for anybody? Does anybody want to do that? Of course not, but just that not having self-care time, the time to work on what I want to work towards, my dreams and my social media page. That was the most part that I was like, wow, I don't think I could do this for life.
yeah, I can relate to that. And it's interesting to see how for you that is what it looks like to have free time to do self-care and to be in a routine, for example, that really speaks to you. But I find it so interesting how like other people, for example, I spoke to somebody who told me, oh yeah, one of the things that I love about the 9 to 5 is that I don't have to worry about what happens in my work after 5 o'clock. They're like, I go home and I don't have to take my work with me. I don't have to be answering phone calls at 11 o'clock or clients blowing me up at this time, which being like an entrepreneur more so, I'm like, yeah, that sounds really nice, because sometimes like our phones, I don't know about you, but my phone's going off sometimes way after 5 o'clock at night. People asking questions, can I book a session? Da da da. How does this work? But they had expressed how that is something that contrasts to what you're saying, is something that does allow them to have the free time solid in their head. This is when I can do stuff for myself. I think where for us it's interesting how we've been fortunate enough to turn something that we're passionate about or something that we enjoy also into somewhat of a profit, if you will, or into a business or into whatever. Whereas some people, the skill set that they might enjoy, they don't necessarily want to turn that into a business or a lifestyle or whatever. But I still think it's great, you know?
Yeah, I think it's crazy how everybody is so different. And I was looking at my parents, I'm like, damn, are they, like you said, truly content with where they are because that's just what they were supposed to do? Or are they just so used to it? By the time, of course, nobody wants to do a 9 to 5, but maybe a month later, you're just used to it. And 2 months, years into it, and you've been doing 9 to 5 job for the last 30 years. Maybe they're just so numb to it that they don't even have opinions or feelings for this anymore.
Mm.
Or maybe not. Maybe again, like you said, they really enjoy that structured life and don't have to take that work outside of what they do.
I wonder that too with like my parents or older people. I don't know if we talked about this before, but also with the whole kids thing, like family. People that are married that have kids, it's like, are we married? Are we in love? Or are we just together because this is what was expected of us? But
Mhm.
I guess we'll never really know for everyone, you know?
So, I guess talking about leadership, how can we apply leadership in our own lives? Now, I
Mm.
mentioned earlier that when you told me that I was meant to step into my own leadership using the Aries moon, which is what I was supposed to work on in this life, I just resonated so much that I just remember I just never really spoke of how I felt, what I wanted. Like I told you, if I get a wrong order at the restaurant, I would never speak up. But this year, I've been really trying to step into my own leadership by using my words. And they say that your words is the most powerful spell. It's literally casting a spell, telling somebody, no, I don't like that. And I used to always think, like, well, when it comes to work or business with relationships, you have to keep your patience. Like, you can't just say what you want. It's about collaboration. But I'm starting to realize that when you suppress it so much like I do and just kind of wait around, nothing ever changes. And if you feel it in your guts that you have to convey your words to somebody, then you should. And this gut feeling that I've been getting to say my message to somebody if I don't feel comfortable with something, or them asking me to do something beyond what was in the contract, or if somebody made you feel uncomfortable in whatever kind of ways, I recently was able to speak up and say something about it, which made me just feel so much empowered, like my own leadership. That's my form of leadership where I just want to stand up for myself in all areas of my life.
That's really beautiful. And it makes sense too with the Aries. I know that I kind of maybe touched on this earlier when we asked about leadership by sign, but Aries is, I think, one of the more classic placements of like leadership in the natal chart. Like some people will say, oh, when you're thinking about leadership, look to see where Aries is in your chart, or look at Mars and see what type of style you might have, which is the planet naturally ruled by Aries. Aries is a fire sign, it's a pioneering sign. It is the sign that is willing to go first when others aren't. It has courage, you know, it takes the leap of faith and just trust that it will figure it out. And the other aspect of Aries that's coming out in what you're saying is the knowing that you have to advocate for your own needs, or that the understanding that what you want and what you desire is just as important as what other people desire, in the sense that it's just as worthy of being spoken out and communicated, right? And the hope is that if you're with a team or whatever, like there can be collaboration necessary. Or, I'm sorry, there can be collaboration that ensues because of people speaking up. But like you said, you know, if you don't say anything, if you never advocate for yourself, then you'll certainly never have your needs met. You'll certainly be left in this position where, you know, nobody even knows that you're feeling any type of way about anything. So I think that those are qualities in general, yes, that we find with leaders, is people who are pioneering in some way or another, whether it's like a CEO doing something new and innovative, or like one employee who's part of like a team of people who speaks up and says, hey, you know, this is bothering us, or like this is something that I've noticed in the team that's causing a problem. It takes courage, you know, to step up and go to a superior and say, hey, there's a problem here that I think needs addressing. You know, it's courageous to do things like that nowadays.
I think fear is no joke. I think most people fear hurting other people's feelings, or if you cut it off with somebody by saying harsh words or standing up for yourself, you think like that person's gonna like forever be gone out of your life.
Mm,
So I think fear stops us from doing a lot of things. But
sure.
this year, I'm starting to learn that fear is just an emotion. Like once you get through something really tough, like it wasn't even that big of a deal. Yeah. So what kind of leadership are you, Emma, and how are you applying that this year?
I do really identify with being somebody who is an idea generator. Someone who thinks maybe, I don't want to say outside the box, but I do try to think outside of the box. And I also find that I do relatively well in analysis and encouragement. The way that I frame things, I think, can be helpful and perspective stuff. So even now, with what I'm doing with work, I'm angling things to do leadership consultancy, and focusing on things like soft skills, emotional intelligence, relational intelligence. How are we communicating, and the soft skills that are important in leadership? So I think that that is sort of the area that I play around in when it comes to leadership. But I do resonate greatly, for example, with what you said about initiating things more often and realizing that closed mouths don't get fed, if you will.
Mm.
So, just to give an example, there's this company that I don't want to say consulted with, but there's this company that I have collaborated with in the past. They've called me in to do some astrology themed events. And in the past, they were always pretty general events, how to use astrology for like self development, or just doing readings, tables. And they had contacted me again later at some point and asked if I wanted to offer some more services. And so naturally, I said, sure, let me give you some services. And I brainstormed a list of services to give. And so, because in the past I had always done entertainment focused general astrology stuff, I was like, okay, I'll brainstorm like two or three ideas for that. And in the back of my mind, I was like, what about leadership? Like, I know that I've never offered this to them before, but I feel like I could really give something valuable here. And I feel like they would really enjoy this as well. But then there was another voice in my head that's like, no, don't do that, because like, just don't say anything, because why would you do that? Like, this is what they hired you to do before, just do it again. But I was like, no, you know what? I'll never know if I don't pitch the idea. The worst thing that's going to happen is they'll be like, we'll go with this one instead. So I sent the email and I was like, oh yeah, I also have this other offering. I'm not sure what you think, but I think whatever. And sure enough, she actually got back to me, and the one that she was interested in was the one about leadership. So I have noticed that for myself, one of my own flaws or shadows that I had been working through for a while was not being afraid to take initiative on my own, and very literally to like go first or initiate or pilot something without somebody giving me permission first, or without somebody asking me or inviting me first. And so I think as of late, that's one of the things that I've been working on most. But overall, that is how I would kind of describe more of my leadership style is more,
Wow, I love that.
yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
I know it's a little very similar to what my mom always says is that the baby who cries first gets fed first.
Yeah, you make some really great points. And actually, I was speaking to another friend of mine who is a serial entrepreneur. And one of the things that he actually told me, one of the first times that we had ever really had a conversation, was he's like, I love rejection. I love rejection because it really motivates me to figure out, like, how do we turn this no into a yes? Or sometimes it's not always about that, right? It's not always about turning a no into a yes. Sometimes it's just, finding a different strategy or moving to a different partner or whatever the case may be, right? But I could see how he's become so successful because he's not deterred by rejection. He doesn't take that as like, oh, I failed, I should give up this and that. He's like, nope, okay, cool, next, on to the next thing. And I think that that's a quality, of course, not without nuance, the quality of being able to cut your losses instead of dwell on a no, or dwell on the past, or dwell on the pain of something not working out, especially when it comes to your professional life. I think is a strength to have and to develop. So, yeah,
Yeah. And talking about that and how we talked about Trump in the beginning, not that we're political or support any
right.
sides, but I think it's really interesting how there was a story where years back, Trump was trying to sell like a hotel or a land to Chinese investors, and the Chinese investors really wanted Hotel A. But Trump really tried to sell this like landmark that he owned that was like unsellable at the time or something. But
Hmm.
somehow he, like he said, rather you lie, rather you fake it till you make it. At the end of the day, he was able to sell that to these investors, which seemed impossible at the time. And I think some leaders or some quality of that level of leader does require fake it till you make it. And I think I stand by that because there's so many scammers out there. I forgot his name, like one of the biggest scammers in America. He's in jail. But if you use fake it till you make it to your own benefit in a positive way, at the end of the day, people don't look at the exact details. Like as long as you package something right, people will buy it and it ends up working. And sometimes that's what's needed to get to the level that you want. So, yeah, like you said, don't be afraid of rejection. Sometimes you have to just get that foot through the door and figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like most people that would consider themselves leaders, actually, you know what? Forget it. Don't even. I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm like, you know what is my thought? It's incomplete. It's gonna come out wrong. So never mind. Forget it.
Yeah, to
Oh
be
my god.
honest, you guys, like this episode, I have so much I want to overshare, but we're trying to be a little careful because, like we got to protect our reputation too.
Oh, like I have this problem of like having a lot of thoughts, but then I'll sometimes go to speak them before I've really thought through what I'm about to say, and then yeah, so trying to do less of that.
One problem that I had all my life was to cut things off. It's scary to
Okay.
cut things off, especially people or businesses or ideas where you've been marinating for such a long time since you were a child, such as, is it right for me to continue music, for example? Like it's been something that I've been working towards since I was like 13 years old. But now at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I should be holding on to the old me. Or a person where I've bonded friendship or maybe relationships, romantic relationships for years, where it's like, am I chained by the good times? And am I using that to continue stringing along something that needs to be let go? And I'm really learning this year that is it more painful or hurtful to hold on or to let go?
Hmm.
And I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So sometimes ending brings a new opening. So I think stepping into your own leadership is also being decisive. I'm a Gemini and being crazy grace. I am so indecisive. I will walk into McDonald's and stand there for 20 minutes because I don't know what I want.
Yeah.
That's always me. Like I will go into a boba shop and I'm like, I want all of it. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, you have to be decisive and you have to make your own decision. And is there a right decision? That's also something I've been thinking of. Maybe there is zero right or wrong decisions in life. It is just you make a choice and you make that right. So that's the kind of advice I want to give to you guys. If you're struggling with that, you're not alone. So I'm learning to be decisive.
That's so on brand for like a Gemini, and I know you're a Libra rising as well, and Libra especially can have like a trait of being a little bit indecisive because of the fact that they're always
Mhm.
weighing yourself and other people. And I know there's like this whole Cancer South node of being chained to the past and really holding on to the nostalgia, the memories, or just the comfort or safety or familiarity of it. I think for me, one of the holes that I've experienced in my own leadership is a lack of, interestingly enough, a lack of authority, as in being comfortable claiming my own position of authority in my life. And I'm not saying like worldly, I'm saying within my own life, how do I step up and lead my own life? Like, how do I give myself the authority to just do what I want? If I want to do something, I'm not saying do what I want with disregard to other people. I'm saying if this is the dream that I have, what is stopping me from trying to make it a reality? And I kind of alluded to this already, but the piece of advice that I would give to anybody listening is to understand and think about what it means to become the authority of your own life. Because if you're always waiting for permission from somebody else or permission from some type of perceived authority, kind of is similar to the story that I just gave about the company that I had worked with. When you haven't claimed your own authority, then you'll live by someone else's.
Mhm.
That's just kind of it, you'll always be waiting for somebody else to say, yes, I think that that's a good idea, or like, no, you should change this. And don't get me wrong, especially in say something that I do, like it is very valuable to speak to other people who have been where I've been at starting a business or being new in this industry or whatever. It's so helpful to get a pulse on what's going on. But I have come across many people who are also entrepreneurs who I would express to them and explain to them, this is what I'm interested in doing and this is what I do. And the minute that they hear something about astrology or they hear something that's not about very specific ways of thinking, I have been met before with, oh my God, that's never going to work. You got to change your whole thing. You got to think like a corporate company. You got to think like Amazon. You got to think like Apple. What I had done is put my own authority to the side and only relied on that as my permission to do what I wanted, then I would never go for it. Do you see what I'm saying? I would have never tried. I would have been like, oh, because this person told me that this isn't going to work and they must know better. Yeah, let me just scrap the whole thing. I'll just do something else because they said so. No. Listen to your own authority and understand what it's saying to you. What is it speaking to you? What is it drawing you toward? What it trying to get you to get out there and do, you know? And I think, yeah, when you can figure that out, then a whole world of things can open up for you, opportunities and visions and dreams that maybe you've always had or ones that come to you because you have harnessed the power of that authority.
Yeah, and everybody has their own point of view and ways that made them succeed, but doesn't mean that that's your road.
Yes.
Just like there is a infinite ways to get to one number. Like
Mhm.
5 plus 5 is 10, but so is infinite number of ways. All
Cool.
right, you guys. So step into your own leadership. Let us know your astrology and how leadership affects you guys. Thank you so much for listening and see you guys next time.
Bye.